Muthanna, entitled Disruptive Innovation and the Heart of Mindfulness. So I would just like to briefly introduce Dr. Sujatha to everybody. I think all of us know her well, but for those who are meeting her for the first time, a talent strategist and a leadership coach with over 18 plus years of diverse experience, Dr. Sujatha Muthanna is the Global Head Deployment, Talent Transformation Platform, Strategic Accounts Infosys Limited. Adopting business storytelling, design thinking, consulting, and coaching methodologies, she works with market clients to drive transformation, business impact, organizational change management, and culture immersion. Client testimonials stand testament to her strengths, collaboration, innovation, and transformation. A design thinker from the D School of Stanford University and an accredited leadership coach, PCC from International Coach Federation, she has worked with C-suite clients of F500 organizations across industry segments and geographies to facilitate mindfulness in innovation. As managing director of Rustic Agro Solutions, an entrepreneurial venture she founded, her focus is to provide authentic, mindful experiences to her global clients. So wonderful to have you here, Sujatha. And so I would like to, start.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you.
Start the session with, with a kind of a prelude to the talk. So what do you think is the deeper mindset to drive innovation?
So if we have to get into that, probably I'd like to look at and share with all of you the way we currently are. And I'm not referring only to the pandemic that we're all going through. Despite what we're going through, there's so much of innovation that's happening around. And I'm going to quickly do this. I'm going to share my screen. Abhi, if you can, share, give me the permission for that. I want to share something that might give a little bit of context to what we're going to be talking about in a while. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, we are
yes.
You're able to see. I'm trying to put it in the full screen mode. Is it in the full screen mode now?
No.
No. Okay. Seems to be some.
कड़ी खाएंगे क्या? ये पूछ क्या है लोगों? हाँ, कुछ नहीं, कड़ी दिखा देगा. कड़ी खा लेंगे ना,
For some reason, it's not going into the full screen mode, but I'm going to continue with this. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. Requesting all participants to mute your microphones, please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Sujatha.
Okay, there is some tech monkey that is happening out here.
No, it's loading this phone.
I think you can just continue, without full screen. I think we were able to see the slide quite clearly.
Sujatha, just try closing the file and open it again. I think her line dropped. Yeah. Sometimes it happens when you go on this thing, no screen mode, full screen mode. Is the problem?
Yeah. So she can just retain the slide as it is.
Yeah. No, she has to join back now. She's not there. So tell me, Raj, how was your session yesterday when you were finalizing about the trial what you did yesterday with her? How was it? What was your feel after the talks?
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, we have a whole bunch of things listed out to talk about.
Yeah.
And, a lot of new thoughts. Also, how to bring Well, I don't want to burst the bubble, so I'll wait for her to join.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So,
Hi.
hey, Sujatha, I think you're
Yeah,
back.
hi.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
So don't worry.
And
Don't go into full screen. I think you can just share the slide as it is. That
mm,
works well. Yeah.
Your video is off, Sujatha.
mhm. Okay, is this better now?
Yeah, much better.
All right. So disruptions happen all over, and not just in the space of innovation. So we're going to jump right into what I thought might be of interest and might set the context for this conversation today, right? And Raj, in response to your question, right, what is it that we need to think of? What are some of the facets of innovation that we need to look at? But even before we get into that, I have a couple of questions. How many of us are aware of what this is? Something that happened in the last couple of months. There's been a lot of talk around it. This is worth 69 million USD. Does that ring a bell? This is the NFT. This is actually a breakthrough innovation that has happened in the art space, where NFTs are valued so high, where a person called Beeple was not able to sell his painting for $100, has now been able to sell his NFT for 69 million USD. Right? And what is this all about? It's about his 5,000 days that he has spent putting together data and using blockchain. He's been able to trace his entire journey. And this is something that has been bought by somebody, right? So in the context of innovation, look at the way in which people don't really want to possess an article, but they're fine having something which is in the digital space, which can be shared with everyone, right? So this is the NFT. I'm just going to go into something out here, right? And all of us have probably seen this or heard about it. The first one out there, and I'm just going to slowly move this a little away just in case you don't get to see it, right? We've been speaking about it. We have Elon Musk, who has set up his, Tesla and everything here in India. And very soon we're going to be seeing a lot of the driverless cars, right? We're talking about autonomous cars. We're talking about cars which, are driverless. And the whole idea is how immersive is the experience going to be for you and me? That's the level of innovation where there was a time when without a driver, we couldn't step out for anything, right? And we're getting into a space where we're looking at driverless cars. Look at this other one, which is about a robotic AI engineering that has happened, where a person with an amputation does not have to worry about what is going to happen in the future at all, right? Because he is going to be enabled to walk just as seamlessly as he used to do earlier. The next one that we're talking about, what I've given you out here is areas where disruptive innovation has come in a very, very beautiful manner. And it's here. And we're talking about 2020. It's not like something that is part of a science fiction movie. All these are things that we're hearing about, and some of it is actually happening. And even a place like, even in Chennai, there is work that is being done extensively in the picture out here, which is a 3D image, right? So they're actually coming up with a 3D image of the heart. So people who have problems with the heart won't be in a situation where they really have to grapple around with problems around the cardiac. And Deepa, you might be knowing about this. Let's look at the other one, which is about drones. How are we using drones? Drones as delivery machines, drones that are going to be providing fertilizers for large fields. So in the agricultural sector, there's so much of disruptive innovation where dependence on human beings are going to go away, or it's going to reduce, which is also going to make those people start focusing on things that are going to be more relevant to the end users. Or look at the last one, which is all about IoT and wearables, and all of us are using it in some way or the other. The point is, disruptive innovation is about taking innovation to a totally different level. How can you create new markets? And that's exactly what this is about, right? Innovation happens in an everyday life, right? It could be through jugards and all of it. You have these incremental changes that we make when we're probably trying to block the sun from your balcony or something like that. But if it is out there, which is relentless and which is trying to bring about some kind of a radical change and new markets, that gets classified as disruptive innovation. And for that, the need, or take a look at what we have heard in the last 1 week or 10 days. Does this ring a bell? How many of us want to be tourists in space? And then we can be part of the yeah, Virgin Galactic, right? This is what Richard Branson did about 7 to 10 days ago. And he had a dream. And I'll come to your question, Raj. There is something that happens within people who are creating these new markets, right? They believe in themselves. They believe that they have something, irrespective of what anyone else thinks, whether it's possible or not. They believe that it is truly possible for them to take something from point A to point Z, right? And that's the beauty of innovation, right? So, or take a look at this, right? We're all going to go into this, or probably have experienced it at, if you want to take a look at the Sistine Palace, you don't really need to go there anymore. You have virtual museums that are created. In fact, I'm currently working with a particular team to reimagine museum experiences. And it's a fascinating area to work in, because you can actually have immersive experiences out here. You have so much of technology that can come together to give people experiences. You have AR, VR, and all of that to facilitate, okay? Or in case you want to take a look at the Amazon, you can do that as well. You don't really have to go to the Amazon forest. So the world has changed, the world is changing, and this kind of disruption is something which is very fascinating. When Clayton Christensen spoke about it in 1997, I think 1997, he spoke about an innovator's dilemma. He said that it's very difficult for people to understand what to innovate, because large enterprises, large organizations are trying to bring about radical changes. Let's look at how education has completely changed as of today. Right, everyone is moving in the direction of platforms. How was it possible? Was it just because technology was available? And with that, I'm just going to stop sharing this and then come back to your question, Raj, which is, what are some of these elements that actually make these grand dreams happen? Right. The first in line that comes to my mind is what Elon Musk always speaks about, which is the why. Right? Why shouldn't it be different from what it currently is? Right? Or why should I bring about some change instead of what is it that I want to do, or how do I want to do it, which is more the technical and the operational part of it. How can we start thinking in a very strategic manner? And this is something that a lot of the radical thinkers or disruptive innovators bring to the table, which is the why question. Yeah. The next one is about polarity, the polarity mindset. The second one is about the polarity mindset. There are a whole lot of things that are happening, right? However, it is the power of collaboration. How can I just not accept something the way it is, and also start looking at how bringing about changes out there, right? It's not just about what is it, but and the and element that we need to bring in. And that is so beautiful, because that also talks about your cognitive flexibility. You see something that is happening and you believe that you might think that that's not possible. Instead of that negative approach to that, how can I start looking at, I have an idea, how can I weave it into something that already exists? right? So that's the cognitive flexibility or the polarity mindset that can really help in disruptive innovation. The third out there is the ability to accept failures, right? Not everything that you're going to come up with or design is going to going to see a lot of success, right? It's also going to be you're going to have failure. So instead of creating a whole lot of things and putting in a lot of effort, how can we start embracing failure a lot earlier, right? This fail fast mindset is something that is a lot of organizations are working on it. A lot of parenting is also about accepting failures, because when we as parents start helping people to accept failure, they start looking at failure as a very insignificant thing, because they're going to learn from it instead of allowing that to be pulled down, right? The next one is empathy. The fourth one that I want to talk about is empathy. And empathy is about, we speak about empathy quite a bit, but when we're talking about the mind of a disruptive innovator, he needs to understand what is actually hurting, or what are some of the pain points of those end users. And that's where empathy comes in. Do I really know what happens to that patient who goes to the hospital and is not able to access the kind of medical facilities he or she needs at that particular time? Or let's say there is somebody at a ticketing counter and is trying to get some tickets and is not unable to do that, or is trying to get some kind of a facility, right, or a service. What is the kind of empathy a disruptive innovator needs to have? It's not about, I have this particular solution and I'm going to offer it to you on a platter, but it's more along the lines of what is the actual need. And that's where empathy comes in. The inquiry, the questioning, to be with the other person, to understand, I might have something to share or offer as a product, but what is the actual need? And that's the client centricity that I'm also talking about. The last one out here is believing is seeing. Again, it's about the belief part of it, right? And I believe that disruptive innovation also has an alignment, right? An alignment between the body, mind, and the spirit, and the soul. So it's important for us to be able to understand that there's a lot that goes into innovation, which is about believing, right? I believe that this is possible, and that's the reason why I'm going to make it happen. I don't have to see something to believe that it's going to be possible, but I just need to believe that it's going to be possible nevertheless. I don't have a wireframe. I don't have a grand plan or a strategy, but I believe that I'm going to be making it to space, just like Branston went with his Virgin Galactic. Yeah, so these are the 5 things that I believe are the mindsets that are different from a disruptive innovator versus somebody who probably has ideas and who brings about incremental changes.
That's great. That's great, Sujatha. So tell me a little bit about, how organizations are grappling with change and innovation, and how far are they taking disruptive innovation to the next level?
Sure. And I think the last couple of years, and since the fourth industrial revolution, we are now in the fourth industrial revolution. The last couple of years have been really fascinating, because we've moved away from a knowledge economy where there's a lot of data that's available, a lot of content that's created, and a lot of functionalities in the technical space, right? Whether you're picking up a mobile, the mobile has so many functionalities, and all other mobiles also have similar functionality. So what then differentiates one product from another product, right? And that is where the value comes in. So what kind of value creation is the organization doing to take business from point A to point Z, right? And that is the beauty of how organizations are looking within. There are 2 things that are happening. There are some organizations that are probably comfortable just going ahead and trying out some small little incremental changes. Yeah, this is a process that I'm following while engaging with a client, or this is how I can help the client move from the kind of transformation that they're currently doing to the next step. But there are some who deeply engage themselves at a value level. It's not just a product that we that we want to offer, that they want to offer, but it's at a value level. In my organization, we call it life enterprise. And the life enterprise is such that it's about not just being with the organization, but being there to bring about visceral changes, right? So you understand, the macro organization, which is the different structures and the different models, business models and all of it. But it's also about understanding within your organization, how do people sense the information? How do people feel the information? What are the interconnectedness? What are the, what is the organization network like? What are the handshakes that are happening between units within units? And it's not very easy, because while we have multiple systems, it's also about looking at how do the handshakes happen between systems. Some of them could be legacy systems, and some of them could be very innovative new systems, but the handshakes have to happen, right? And that is something that a lot of organizations are looking within. I could speak about my organization, but we're doing a lot of work also with other organizations where we're looking at digital transformation, whether in the financial services space or in the manufacturing space, where we are reimagining experiences for the end users. In the manufacturing space, it could be, it could be like a heavy machinery which goes on the agricultural fields, which was only earlier doing some kind of work, but now using IoT and artificial intelligence and all of it, it also senses what kind of soil composition is there, flows the data back to the users to give them some kind of a information and insights that the soil composition is nutrients are not good enough, and here is where you need to, this part of your land needs this particular kind of nutrition, and in addition to that, here is where you can buy it. Right, that's the level at which people need to, organizations are going. Even within the organization, I gave you an example of what we're doing in some other organization, but within the organization also, it's about what kind of touch points are you really sensing, what kind of insights are you gathering within the organization, and how are you bringing it all together, because that synthesis is important, right? You can have divergent information, but how does it all converge at some point? Because at the end of it was a call to action, right? And that's the beauty of this entire thing.
That's great. So I have a question for you. You spoke about how these innovative changes can bring about a visceral change in the organization, right? So how do you make sure that that ties in with the philosophy of the organization?
Yes, and that's where the change management happens within the organization, right? And it's not very easy. Like in any kind of change, there will be resistance. Just to give you an example, if you're looking at, if I can go back to one of the mindsets that I spoke about earlier, which is the fail fast, right? Expecting large organizations to embrace mistakes and failure is not very easy. Okay, so what typically happens is that there will be resistance within the organization, from the leadership, from the new entrants, or across the lines. And what we've seen is there's a lot of trust building that is required in organizations, and the way in which they can do it is, there are many ways in which they can do it, but the basic part of it, I go back to empathy, I go back to open communication, right? There has to be a line of sight with individuals to see what are they doing and how does it align with the organization's purpose, right? And that buy-in, in case the employees are able to get that kind of a buy-in, the talent is able to embrace what the organization is doing, change becomes a little faster. While I just said it in a short way, there are a whole lot of mechanisms also that need to go along with it. There are rewards, recognition, there's a lot of new opportunities, job enrichments, all of that need to happen. But at the heart of all of this is trust, openness, empathy, transparency. These play a very important role, especially when an organization needs to go through change.
Okay. So how can we bring more meaningfulness into the ecosystem of an organization and sentience into innovation?
So again, we're talking about many stakeholders here. Here we're talking about the organization, we're talking about the employees. The organization can have its own purpose. Employees can have their own aspiration, right? And there has to be some kind of an alignment. Listening into what individuals need. And when I say individuals and we talk about large organizations, it may not be very easy, but there has to be a lot of listening mechanisms that allow people to express themselves, allow people to share different views. It may not be any rocket science or anything that is really big that they're sharing, but they need to be heard. Employees need to be heard, and that trust building will actually help the organization have a deeper connect with the talent. And that's really important, because if I go back to something that I mentioned earlier, if the organization has to bring about visceral changes, and this is something that I keep saying, right? It's about empathy, it's about belongingness, it's about trust. These are all things that are deeply ingrained in individuals. And if you look at our the culture models, when we look at the culture models, empathy, trust, transparency is not what you see right at the top, right? It's deep inside. And it takes a long time for that trust building to happen. So for sentience to be created in an ecosystem, the organization needs to help employees believe that they're going the right direction, and they're taking them along with them as they are going towards the purpose. Yeah. So sentience is not very easy, because we're talking about how is that handshake, tightly coupled. And if we have to get to that phase, it takes a while. But is it easy? No, not at all. But is it possible? Definitely.
But I'm sure that that has very long lasting effects, not only for the organization, but for the people working there as well.
Absolutely. And I can give you a story of my experience itself. In 2013, 2014, we had a change in leadership in my organization, where we had the CEO as Vishal Sikka, right? He came in from SAP, and what he did was a little different for a traditional organization. He started connecting with people every time he had these flow walks. And it was not just it was a leadership doing the flow walks anytime, anywhere, any place. He could just walk in and have a chat with anybody. And he would do that. And it really helped him understand what were some of the things that happened within an organization, right? And through that, he introduced this particular concept of a mindset of failure being embraced. It's all right to make mistakes, right? You're not going to knock them on their knuckle just because there's been a mistake, because it will stop people from doing anything or taking the risk. And if you have to look at driving innovation in an organization, it's important to embrace risk. And with that, he brought in this philosophy of design thinking. And I am a true believer of that, because he said, it's not about what kind of products or services or a whole lot of apps that you have created within the organization, even if you're a technology-driven organization. Flip it completely. Look at what the end user wants. And the conversations have and he is not with us anymore. He left in 2017, but those 3 or 4 years, and I had a lot of, I'm lucky to have worked very closely with him. So it is really, really interesting to see how some of the philosophies that he brought into the organization, which was about design thinking, empathy, connecting with people, making it very, very customer centric, are here to stay. And it's going to be there for a lifetime, because this is something that we know has helped us bring about a lot of transformational changes in the client ecosystem.
Okay. So, when we talk about innovation, where does mindfulness come into play, and how does heartfulness connect with that? Like you said, that it all has to fit in somewhere. So how do we bring in this connectivity and, take it forward with empathy in a social context?
Sure. So in fact, I'll take the first part of it, which is the social innovation that you alluded to. And I think here is a time for us when we really need to embrace that. The way things are moving, while there is innovation, if you look at digital literacy as an example, right? And a lot of people need to have their their gadgets with them for children in remote villages to be educated, right? There is a big problem, and all of us know about it. We have the sustainability development goals of 2030, where we are looking at environment. Environment is actually in shambles, because in the name of development, there has been a lot of work that has been done. You have these beautiful bridges and beautiful buildings and everything, but at what cost, right? The tree counts have come down, and I can talk about it from the place that I come from. I come from the hills and of Kurk, and they are really pushing a lot of development out there. There's a lot of resistance because we don't want the roads, because it's going to take away a lot of our trees. And when it takes away the trees, our soil becomes a little less stable, right? So there are all these things that are happening. Social innovation is something, whether it is in the area of education or security for women and everyone else, children, or in the area of environment. There's a lot that can be done in that space. And that's where I want to bring in the philosophy of disruptive innovation and mindfulness, because I feel while it appears to be an oxymoron, right, there is something that connects the two, because one is moving at a breakneck speed. The other one is about pausing, right? And as part of the pausing and the looking within and becoming a little more aware of what is all of whatever we are doing taking us to, right? Just to give you an example, if we look at the way big data is being used, right? We use a lot of big data. There's a lot of data crunching that happens when, let's say, enormous amount of data, whether during the elections or something else, right? You want to bring it all together to see patterns. You want to watch those patterns and all of it. You're also looking at how is the data being used, right? There is the ethics that people need to be a little cognizant about, which is, how am I using the data? While there are some countries that have put down a lot of regulations around data privacy, I think this is something that a lot more countries need to follow. We know what kind of a spat we had with, or we continue to have with, Twitter. Right? How is our data being used? And it becomes important for us to really look within. And that is the aspect of the ethics that would come in. And that's where mindfulness is required. There is one part which is moving fast, but there is something which needs to be regulated. And it's not about regulations that need to come in from outside all the time. Even people who are in the innovation space, how is it possible for them to weave this piece around values and ethics into the work that they're doing, whether in the medical field or in the agricultural field or in the telecom sector? How is that all coming together? And there are different ways in which we can do it. And that's where philosophy comes in. Right? The beauty of it is it can be woven together. When you look at what happens in the Western philosophy, and we know what Seneca said, we know what Epicurus said. I'm not going to go into all of those details, right? While we know that in some philosophies, in Western philosophy, they've looked at freedom, family, friends, and insights, right? Looking within to see what are some of the things that you're going to draw from a particular experience or a situation. You have the Maslow's hierarchy that we speak about quite a bit. Everyone talks about it. However, one of the things that we need to probably remember is about 95% of the time, we're striving to finish, we're striving to achieve these generic levels of needs, while we know that right at the top, the the self-actualization comes much later. But to get to that point, while we know it's going to take a lot of time, our aspiration is to achieve the lower end of the pyramid, right? So when that happens, this opportunity to be mindful gets taken away, gets stolen away. And so it's within that individual or a group of individuals, there's a lot of collective wisdom that needs to come in to say, what are some things that we can do differently to be mindful and to create that heartfulness as part of this experience? There's this beautiful experience and book that I read by David Hawkins, right? He says, it's the DNA of happiness. Okay, I went through this some time ago and I felt it was so beautiful, because he said, we can be we can have a lot of things. It can be money, power, position, all of those things. But you're still not going to be happy if you have not understood the purpose that lies within, or your purpose. And that's why I want to connect that back to our Indian philosophy. The basic question that Ramana Maharshi asked us to ask ourselves, right? Who am I? Who am I? That basic question can trigger so much of thought and understanding about our own purpose. So while there are different kinds of philosophies that talk about mindfulness and innovation, mindfulness and heartfulness, I think in the area of disruptive innovation, or even in the area of plain innovation, we're talking about incremental changes. What becomes really exciting is to start looking at how does this align with people? What are some of the social aspects or the social fabric that gets influenced by some of the work that is happening in this space? So yeah, that's my
That's correctly
response.
put, Sujatha. It's very important that we are mindful and heartful about the progress and the innovation that we are creating.
Mhm.
As you rightly said, the impact on the environment, and also being empathetic towards where we are going
Yeah.
is so important. Like if you take the edtech industry, like you said, so much innovation has happened in the last few years. But is it really reaching people? Like for example, you said in a village school, what is the technology that a student will have there, right?
Yeah.
So placing all of this in a social context, and creating that kind of heartfulness and mindfulness, so that we are aware that all of us are not in one part of the spectrum. We are in different parts of the spectrum. And how can we bring it all together mindfully and heartfully is
Yeah.
very, very important, is a very important part, and I think it should stay as a core part of the innovators as well. I
I
think,
just wanted to add one thing here, Raj. Can I do that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. See, when we are talking about, digital literacy, while I did mention the children, I feel that we have a large percentage of our senior citizens. And this is something that I experienced because, the only way to stay connected with different generations is through technology, right? So this generational literacy becomes really key because on one hand, everyone can own, or many people can own different kinds of androids that have the facility, but how many of them can actually use it, and the awareness and the education that is required for people to use it so they don't feel left out. That inclusivity needs to also take into consideration the generation. So the sustainability development goals actually have generational education also as one of its points, but I don't know how much of it is actually happening. But probably that is an area that we can start looking at, and how disruptive innovation can be brought in that space.
Yeah, yeah, very true. I think we have covered most of the points that we wanted to cover. Unless you want to, any offshoot ideas have come from the discussion today. If you don't have anything more, then we can take some questions. Uh, do do the audience have any questions that they would like to ask Sujatha? You can place it in the box, or even unmute your mic and ask the question.
Do let me know. I'll be happy to take your questions. That'll be a trigger for us as well.
Hi, Sujatha ma'am, Dr. Rajshri. I have a question. I'm Ranjana here.
Hi, Ranjana.
Hi, Ranjana.
I'm into English training and soft skills training. I work with college students. Now, I am totally indifferent to IT and innovation and disruption. But interestingly, I was just like, I've been listening to you. I find it very interesting. The topic is good, interesting, but like, I don't know how to ask this question. How do I upgrade myself? What, like, according to the youngsters I come across, I've been using different applications and different the mobile apps to stay updated, what my youngsters, the set of students are doing and all. I was just wondering, like, how do I upgrade myself? How do I keep myself on this on the similar stage to my students?
Yeah, so Ranjana, I'll probably flip that a little bit and ask you this question. Why would you want to upgrade yourself? Because you said you're using different digital devices. I'm a big fan of the why, of Simon Sinek. So that
I'm
helps me
like,
understand.
yeah. but your talk regarding the disruption, the innovation, I've been listening to the last few minutes. I find it little different. I am feeling like as if I'm being left out or something like that.
Okay. All right.
I don't know why. This is the first time I'm feeling such thing.
Hmm,
So that's
hmm.
why I wanted to ask you,
No,
what,
I think that's a great
how can we
question.
upgrade or upskill myself in such a way that even I get to become innovative or creative? How to
That's such a
come to
beautiful question you've asked. And also, it's made me also think, right? Because there definitely there's a divide between what is actually happening in the world and what people are aware of. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible to get to that point. And that's, it's really important for us to understand that. And again, it's in the mindset. One of the mindset sets that I spoke about right at the beginning was cognitive flexibility, right? Do I really want to move from here and bring about some kind of a change out there? And in case you're interested, you can actually go through something called a growth mindset. Okay. So
Okay.
what typically happens is I might tell myself that, hey, I really don't need to change. I'm fine the way I am. I know how to use these devices, and I'm doing quite fine. But the growth mindset is about pushing us into, why don't you go ahead and experiment, explore something else, right? But in order to move from this point to this point, something needs to tell us within as to why I need to move, right? Is it something that you've got as a feedback from people, from your students to say, hey, you know what, I think you need to use something interesting? Or is it because, the world is moving, that's why I want to be part of that movement, right? So those
Probably
are,
because the world is moving. Because
yeah,
every year when we get the LinkedIn survey results,
yeah,
the skills required for this year, the
yeah,
hot
yeah,
list of skills which is required for 2021. Everywhere,
yeah,
every time it's more of IT, technology, a little bit of
yeah.
soft
But
skills
there
is
is
also
also,
included.
but that little bit is very critical. One of which that I want to call out is critical thinking, right? And empathy. These are two things that
Yeah.
have been mentioned time and time again in the
Yeah.
recent reports also, right? So it's about, us wanting to bring about a change. And if it's going to make you feel any better, Ranjana, I have a teenager, and you know how it is, right? The teenagers move at a much faster pace. And for us to keep up with them, it takes a lot of time. So many times, I'm also trying to figure out, is there something new that I need to know about to help me
ஏய்
collaborate
இவளோட
better?
பேக்ரவுண்டே ஒரு ஸ்கிரீன் இது எவ்வளவு அழகா வச்சிருக்கா பாரு சாக்ஷி.
Okay, so is there something that I need to try out? Is there something new that I need to know about to help me collaborate better? Because collaboration is really key in the kind of work that we're doing. So I think there is, everyone is grappling with it. Some might have a little more information because it's part of the job that we do, but it doesn't mean that, people are going to be left behind. And at some point, when you expressed what you just did, it also tells us that there is a lot more opportunity for us to connect with people to try and figure out how we can take them as part of the journey, because that is where we're going to bring about a lot more of universal changes. And it's really important that we take people along. But thank you so much for sharing what you did. And I'll be happy to have conversations with you even later.
Sure. Thank you so much for replying beautifully.
Thank you.
There is a question from Dr. Lata Patil. What is your view on this virtual training? Is it more effective as compared to classroom training?
Yeah. So since I come from a space where we are really putting in a lot of effort to make virtual training very immersive, Lata, Dr. Lata, so that's the ambition, that it becomes so seamless that you won't be able to differentiate between a classroom training and a virtual training. And that's where a lot of technology is coming to play. How can you use your AR, VR? How can you use artificial intelligence, where as a teacher in a classroom would have probably been able to sense some information or questions that a student wants to learn, how can AR facilitate that? Or let's say you want to show some kind of an object or a figure to children, and a lot of schools are probably doing it today. That's where your virtual reality or mixed reality comes into play. How can you give them immersive experiences so that there is a very fine line between actual classrooms and virtual classrooms. I mean, and when we're talking about in the medical space, there's so many surgeries that are being done in a remote manner. I think we have come to a point where we're slowly going to adopt and embrace virtual learning in a very big way, because a lot of effort is being put in by platforms across the globe to make learning immersive and accessible to everybody and seamless. So I think we are going in the virtual space.
Sujatha, if I may add to your point,
Please do.
you spoke about how we are all moving towards creating virtual learning more immersive. I run an edtech company, so we have moved. We get a lot of homeschoolers who learn from home. They don't go to formal schools, but they appear for the exams privately. So how do we then train these children in practicals, right? So if you opt for a science subject, then naturally there is a practical element to it. And today we are able to do it through simulations of experiments online, without holding a test tube or actually doing the experiment on a bench. You're able to do it through a simulation for a student who is able to understand how the experiment is conducted and what is the basis or the logic behind it. So I just wanted to add that point here. There is a question from.
That's a great point. Thanks for that. Thanks, Ranjana. Probably that answers your question as well. I think, I'm sorry, Lata, that answers your question as well. Even difficult things like experiments are being offered on the virtual space.
So thank you, Sujatha. So there is a question by Mr. P.A. Kutappa. How would you encourage innovation, differential thinking amongst youngsters, especially young women? Most managers at work do not encourage asking the why. They just say, do as I say. That's a very, very nice question, actually.
Absolutely. And that's where I think we're talking about working across. Thanks, Kutappa, for that question. We're talking about how do you bring together all the stakeholders. It's not about an organization coming up with different philosophies or different approaches or strategies and all of it. If I don't take people within the organizations, it can be people across levels. It can be contractual workers. If I don't take all of them along, and in this case, the question is about women, right? It becomes so much more difficult for us to think of value creation, because we might end up doing the same thing that we have done 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's just like old wine in a new bottle, that's all, right? You can always package it and present it differently. But if you want to bring about, or if the organization wants to really listen into what's happening, every person in the organization has to play a role. It's not about training people to, and this is something that I've gone through earlier. It's not about training people to speak up, but to create an ecosystem that allows everyone to speak up, right? We've had instances where a manager would come back and say, you've been trained on this, but then I'm facing a client now, so I will ask the question. And so we've got to break those boundaries that are created, that asking a wrong question or asking a question that isn't supposed to be like a heavyweight question is not okay, right? So that is where the ecosystem plays a role. I think there needs to be a complete handshake between stakeholders within the organization. And like you said, and while you mentioned women, I'm also probably going to extrapolate to a lot of people who join the organization who are new hires, right? Who probably have a certain amount of inhibition for whatever reason. It could be because of past experiences, because of what they've gone through in their life and all of it, or what they've heard. And it's important to break those myths that it's okay to ask foolish questions. It's okay to come up with an idea which may not be big bang, right? It's okay for me to share all of this. And that creating a culture of accepting failure is important within organizations. And if organizations just talk about it, but don't allow that to permeate into the DNA of their own organization, I think they're losing a lot of great, brilliant ideas that reside within the employees out there.
They will lose brilliant ideas as well as people with potential.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't make mistakes and learn from them,
Hmm.
it's a feedback mechanism for every individual. uh, I think, employees at various levels need to be given the freedom to experiment, to make the
Yeah.
mistakes and learn from them. And that's something which I also tell people in my organization. Just don't make the same mistake again and again. It
Yeah.
happens. All of us make mistakes, but learn
Yeah.
from them. See how you can improvise on that. So that's
Yeah.
very important. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sujata. So there is a question from Andre S. Prasad. How to balance the two at different levels? I don't know what two he means. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, Honore?
Yeah, the two key points that Dr. Sujatha started with. How do you balance it across different levels, especially when you're working in organization or on a personal and professional level? Like she mentioned about the excellent example of the teenager at home, and you have Gen Z, maybe professionally you're working with. How do you handle it? And you're working across generations.
Yeah. So, and the two that you were mentioning were or referring to were the generations, is it? How do you bring them together? Is it, Andre?
One is the generation, and the other is about the beautiful two things you mentioned about, the two key topics of today.
Okay. Yeah. How do you bring disruptive innovation and mindfulness? And I
Yes.
think
How do you
that's a
balance it?
brilliant question. How do you, yeah. So I think it's also about, when people tend to move at a rapid pace, we may not be able to balance it, blend it right at the beginning. Yeah. And it takes maturity, right? And the maturity sometimes comes naturally to some. For some others, there's a skill that can be learned. That's the beauty of it. Everything can be learned out there, and we can iterate, we can make those changes, we can move from being, T-shaped individuals, skill-based individuals to Z-shaped individuals. We can learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's the beauty of this entire thing. How we bring in the mindfulness component out here is through some of these practices. And I believe in these. That first question that I asked, that I said the Indian philosophy as a large role to play is about the who am I, right? That, no, I'm not able to hear. Am I audible?
There was some.
Yes, there was some disturbance.
Yeah, but now you're.
Okay. Oh, right. Sorry about that. Okay. So it's about the who am I question, which actually helps us go within. It's about self-realization. If you look at what our scriptures talk to us about, it's about the depth of the individual. It is about self-realization. Now, to get to that point, it's not very easy. There are a lot of, people who have done a lot of work to get to that point. But we can do some of these practices like presence. These breathing exercises actually help in centering us. Okay, breathing, centering, right? And the third one that I talk about is really being present when there is something that is happening, right? Embodying presence. And as a leadership coach, this is one thing that I talk to leaders a lot about as part of the coaching conversations I have is you might be really busy doing a lot of fabulous stuff and driving business and, taking business to a totally different realm. But how present are you when you're actually connecting with people? Presence, if we are able to master the skill, right? Even if we don't master it, if we become aware of embodying presence and how this plays a role in this entire journey, in your own journey, because that is going to facilitate a lot of things in the journey of innovation that you're going to embark on or that you're already a part of. So it brings in a lot more of razor sharp focus into the work that you're doing. And when you do that, you're taking your innovation to a totally different realm. And that's where I believe that this mindfulness has a spirituality component, because it's not just about, breathing. There is so much. What is the inner meaning that you get as part of this entire exercise? Do you really understand, or do we really understand how important breathing is for all of us? So some of these mindfulness practices, whether it is breathing, yoga, all of this come in very handy because it helps in centering and brings a lot more of presence into the kind of engagements that you're able to take forward.
Yeah, very true. And I also think in sense, if you want to create a sentience, I think this practice is really helpful.
Raj, just a moment. Sorry to interrupt. I think there is some issue with Sujatha Suresh. Can you just mute your audio?
Yeah, thank you, Sujatha Suresh.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we are down to the last question, unless somebody wants to ask something else. There's a question from Mr. Joseph Bhaskaran. Good to hear you speak about the agricultural application through AI. Can you share a few initiatives on it? Yeah, even I was very impressed with that. That how you have created sensors to sense the different types of soils and all that. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening. This is something that happened about, 4 or 5 years ago when I was working with a German client. I won't be able to, specifically tell the name of the client, but I think it's really beautiful because it's about really trying to understand how do we use the kind of machinery that we currently have. How do you make the iterations that will help that kind of machinery not just do what it is currently doing, but also look at sensing, feeling. And sensing, feeling is not just with people. And because the soil is a living element, it becomes so beautiful that you're actually going out there. The flora, the fauna. I mean, take the example of Google Lens, right? How beautiful is it that you can take a picture of a flower and you get to know what kind of a flower and all the nomenclature of the flower, right? So it is possible, it is happening. In fact, for the enterprise that I founded, which is Rustic Agro, one of the things that we're doing is to bring in blockchain, right? We want people to understand where the products that they are having on their plate is coming from. It's coming from the hills, and who's actually picking it for them, right? So we're trying to bring some kind of a traceability of all the products that we're taking to market. And the agricultural space innovation is happening at a really beautiful pace. The one that I spoke about, which is the wheels actually getting a sense of the soil, is like I said, happened a couple of years ago. It's gone beyond that as of now. There's one question on hydroponic farming uses AI. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Raj, we're not able to hear you.
Yeah, sorry. If there are no further questions, then I would like to thank Dr. Sujatha for this beautiful session on innovation and how to be conscious about it, how to tie in the various aspects of the body, mind, and spirit into innovation, and how to bring it into social context, how to bridge generations, how to cater to the different spectra that people are in. The beautiful session. So thank you so much for your time and for the knowledge share. And thanks to all who made the time to attend the session. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Raj. And thanks for asking those beautiful questions. They kind of nudged me to share at least a smattering of information or whatever I've been working on for a while. And I just want to share with all of you, there's this beautiful book by Cal Newport, and I suppose some of you would have probably read it. It's called Deep Work. He says that, there's a lot of shallow work that we tend to do, right? But it's important for us to start looking at discipline and consistency in what we do, because then we can spend a little more time on deep work. And some time ago when I was in Switzerland, I went to this place of Carl Jung, where he actually pushed out everyone. That used to be his place, heaven, where he would push out everyone and he would stay in that place alone, because that was the place for his reflections. And I believe deep work helps us to get to that point, because it helps us just go really within us towards that self-realization, which will give us a lot of insights and aha moments, which we can take to the next level for ourselves as well as all our stakeholders.
Yeah. And we have a message from Swapna Nair, who says that she would like to add Indistractable by Neer EL to the list.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Swapna, for that.
Welcome, Sujatha. Lovely, lovely session.
Thanks, one and all. And I would like to request the council members to stay on the call.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call and for those lovely, lovely questions. Really enjoyed myself. I hope you
Thank you,
did
Dr.
too.
Sujatha. It was a very good,
Thank you so much.
informative session. So nice of you.
Thank you so much, on the way.
All the best.
Thank you.